How's everybody doing? We'll get started in just a little bit here. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Can you guys hear me? Just raise your hand if you can. Okay. So, welcome to week number 3. You guys are moving along pretty good here. We have basically in week 3, we'll go over a little bit of week 2, and then we'll go over some of the things in week 3. You can see week 3 again is by the line items. It looks a whole lot easier than week 2 and week 1, but there's still a lot of items in it that's a little more technical. So, but it is easier week as well as week number 4 is easy as well. But let me go over items here for week 2, which is we looked at goal 4, 5, and 6. You went over how to use and understand a little bit about objects. Any, Anybody has specific questions on objects? I know you guys are getting into a little more advanced objects right now, but it's a little more advanced object questions. Go ahead and hold off until we talk about this week. But any questions you have on some of the basic objects?
Yeah, I had a bit of a hard time extracting data from objects. So, say I think it was week one where we were able to pull info from an array
Okay.
using the element
Hmm.
number or items. So when it's kind of like an array in an object for dual three, I think it was, or one of them where we had to put an array within an object. It was almost to me, it felt like it was like one more layer deep, and I really struggled with trying to figure out how. I think it was the midterm trying to do the average GPA, so I didn't know how to extract that info from there.
Extract the data so you can use it, like extract a GPA.
Yeah, so for instance, each student had, three different GPA grade
Right.
GPAs. So it was how to pull each one of those out and then use those in a mathematical, function and return them. Hopefully that makes sense.
Um, I think it does. Let me see if I got an example here. Because really, you would use something like a dot notation to extract that array at that point in time. So it would be, let me open this up here. So to use the information, it would be something like this. I would, oh, hold on for a sec. I have this in an array where I'm actually pulling out the information. But since there's multiple students, you would have something similar to this, where you would say this would be in a loop because we're looking at all the students, and it would say go ahead and go to the student array and to whatever index number and go ahead and pull out the GPA. If I console log this out, it should give me the array of GPA numbers. And then you would take that array of GPA numbers and create a function that you would pass it information to. You would pass the array of GPAs into the function, and that array or that function would then calculate what the GPA is. Now, there was an assignment or exercise you guys went through on calculating a GPA using an array. So as long as
Yeah,
this,
that what you have written there, yeah, what you have written there makes complete sense to me. I understand that.
okay,
Or maybe just for the midterm, I wrote my code harder than it should be. So for instance, my object is named, I have my variable var student info and then equals, and then so that's my object, student info. And then within student info, I have a key called students. And then within students, I have my array of objects. So it's almost like if you
yeah,
look at what you wrote, it would be there's student info
right.
would be one more thing to the left of students there.
Well, let me jump in real quick because I know a few students had that issue, and I'm trying to figure out where that actually came from.
Okay.
Where people were creating, not a lot, but a few created an array or an object of an array of objects. Um, I'll give you an example here in a sec, but I just want to point out here that this instruction specifically said create an array of student objects, not an object of an array of student objects. So what I've seen, let me paste this here. Hold on for 1 second. So if I had this code, let me make that a little smaller. I'm going to just indent this so it's a little more readable. Now, what some people were doing here, instead of creating a student array, right? The array starts with this block, and then you have objects within the array. So the object started with the brackets. There's a few people that were, well, let me, the example that you gave here, Lee, was info objects, and then this would end the close the object. So now you would have a object, and within the object you would have a student array, and within that array you would have objects. For some reason, a few people were creating that, and I was wondering if the instructions actually said that or if there was some confusion.
Yeah, it must have been just confusing because that's exactly what I did. Mine looks almost identical to what you wrote, except I have
Right. So I'm wondering where
instead
that
of
actually came from because I'm
and
looking at the
right.
instructions and I'm all I see is this and it's bolded array of
Hmm.
student objects. It doesn't say objects of an array of student objects. So, and here's the object example. And so all you needed to do was take those objects just like this and just put it in an array. That's all that this was asking for, as well as this one.
So what you wrote, if you can go behind that other screen, what you wrote there? Because mine says, var student info equals, and then the curly brace, and then
Yeah, that's not correct. It
yeah,
should be
and
just
then
as
there it would say students colon, and then the the bracket. So it looks like the way I read it was because objects is plural. I thought, okay, create an array of objects.
right.
Maybe I see
That
where I went
says
wrong.
that's the array, and then you have
Hmm.
plural,
There's the objects.
right?
Okay,
And the
got
idea
it.
here is that eventually what's going to happen, um, like if you guys really had a student system, you're not necessarily going to see all the data like this, right, inside of a program. What's going to happen is the program or the data might be formatted like this, but the data might be coming from some other database somewhere. And all you needed to know was when I make a call to the database and it's going to pull in an object for each student with all the student information in it, all I need to know is what this format is, so I know how to use it. And the data that comes to me, I'm assuming is going to keep the same format. So eventually that's what's going to happen with this type of data. So you'll
Yeah, I
see.
noticed that in this week's reading material. I was like,
Mhm,
okay, I see how this works now with
right. So
our
there was
advanced objects.
some items that's kind of weird too. On again, I was looking at the instructions and make sure the instructions wasn't reading wrong, but a few people were actually putting functions at the end of here too, and I don't know where that came from. Because again, when you look at this as just strictly data, just flat out data, because this is what's going to be, if you write a school system one day, all you're going to worry about is just the data at that point in time. No functions or anything will be in objects. It'll just be just flat out information about a student at that point in time. So this is just a simplistic object for a student. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. That clears it up for me. I see where I went wrong just reading the instructions. Because I even made my comments, create, let's see what I have here. I even wrote it, create object named student info, and then create key to contain an array of objects, and then create an array of objects. So
Right.
I just had it backwards. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Now get with me after this, Lee, and let's talk about it. That was Lee, right? Lee, was that you? This thing is
Yes, sir, that was me.
okay. Alrighty. Any other questions on objects? Again, just so you guys have a bigger picture, that information again on the arrays of students is real important because when you get into some of the back end courses, when you start using the database information, you're going to create these little objects from the data that's coming back from the database. And then you're going to then use that to do simple things, maybe like console log information out or just output reports of information of students. So it's just giving you an idea on how data is formatted um, on the back end of the website side, because data is like formatted like this all the time, especially with like user type information. So later on, what will happen is you might actually this might be in the PWA2 class, right? You might have an object because you have a function of, let's say the function is login, and with the login, um, normally normally a user will type in a username, right? And then there probably will be a password. Well, most likely it'll be a password. This object is basically the same object as the student, right? It just you have the key, right? And then you have the value. So let me put this other one back up here again. Okay, so you have your student array, but here you have your key. Here, the same thing as username is jbon. The key here is address, and here's the value. So it's the same format. But this is sort of in reverse because this is information that if we're logging in, we're going to send this information to the server. And then it's going to be the server's job to pull this information apart. Basically, it's going to pull it out. It's going to pull my username out. It's going to pull my password out. It's going to then compare it to information that's in the database. And then the server will send back if I'm a valid user or if the authentication, if something with like my username or password was wrong, it would then come back to me as a user to tell me that it's an incorrect login to try again. So it's similar type of formatting. It's just objects, which is just keys and values. Now on the formatting side, for some of you on the object side, be careful about doing things like, I did see some of this where everything was just strung into, I won't be able to do it here. But basically what was happening is everything was concatenated. So you have this object, just look at this as just one long line. And then the next object, which is this one, was at the end of the line. And so all it looked like was one huge line of just an object with information in it. Do yourself a favor by just, because sometimes it's hard enough trying to program, but make it easy on yourself by formatting things nicely so at least it helps you visually see how things are broken out. I mean, it's a whole lot easier looking at this than it would be if these two objects were strung out in one line. I mean, just think if I had like 100,000 or just 10,000 users, you really wouldn't be able to read anything if it was just one line. But you would be able to read it if it's like this. You would be able to read it if it's broken out like this and formatted in this way. Any other questions? Okay, then you guys got into the DOM, and within the DOM, there was the introduction of what the DOM is, which is mainly a tree structure of the whole web page. And then you have the DOM selector. you have the DOM selector and traversing, which kind of go together. And again, with the DOM, all you're trying to do is select something on the website because you want to do something with it. That doing something might be a manipulation, which is just changing text information or changing the name of a button, just like you guys did in the guessing game, or just like you did in the duel 3 fight. You changed the button to read done, or you changed the HTML so you can see the score, or you can see who won, or if both players died, you could see that output as well. And then you created events. The events would be just the buttons. Say in the dual fight, the duel 3 fighting game, you created the event on the red button. On the guessing game, you created the event on the button as well. And with the button or with that event came the handler. And all the handler is this function that runs once once an event kicks off. Then you guys got into that crazy regular expressions, and you got to practice that using the form validation. Hopefully that helped a little bit as far as understanding a little bit about the structure. Again, not necessarily to the point where you have to remember everything, because that's just crazy stuff to remember. But just for your own good, that you know now what a regular expression is, why you use it, how you use it in a form, um, and then learn how to read it a little bit, just in case you have to make modifications. And then there was math methods and date methods. Now, I am almost completed grading all the midterms. On some of the midterms, well, there are, let me see what I got down here. Let me go through here real quick, and then I'll come back to what I was trying to say. But on the midterm and a guessing game, if it comes back where you don't have 100 on them, then I would highly, highly suggest that you go back to both the midterm and the guessing game and fix it, so it is at 100% quality. You can check back with me too after you make modifications to see if it's acceptable and if it would have been graded at 100%. So make sure you get those done before. Well, the hint is it's going to be on a later assignment. The only later assignment you guys have after this week is a final. So it's going to be on a final. So if you want to do good on a final, make sure you get this midterm at 100% as well as the guessing game. Got it? I hope you guys are hearing me, because I am totally shocked a lot of times when I grade the finals and the student has the same issues that they did when they were in the midterm. And so things were delivered with midterm type issues. So I know in one way the person didn't even listen to the GoToMeeting archive. Um, Therefore, there's not much I can do. So, giving you a huge hint. Make sure to fix the midterm as well as a guessing game if you don't have 100. Script tag placement. Script tags should always, for now, I know there's some teaching out there that you can put the script tag up in the header of the HTML file. Always put it down for now, down in the body, inside the body tag, all the way at the bottom. So it'll be right above the closing body tag, which looks like this. Okay. Always put your script tag above this. one of the reasons being is that it, it may not affect some of the things you guys are doing now, but it may affect it later. A lot of times, what happens is a lot of the HTML that's going to be above here needs to all have been read by JavaScript before it hits the JavaScript script tag, because you're going to potentially use a lot of things that's in that HTML. For instance, if you were creating that dual 3 fighting game and you needed to set a button up on that red button, and so all the HTML is read in, and then it hits that script tag. When it hits that script tag, inside of your dual 3 game, you had a item there to set up an event on the red button, right? Well, if that red button's not there, what is it going to do? It won't be able to find it. And a lot of times it won't find it if your script tag is in the header. So for now, just make sure you have your script tag right above the body, the ending body tag. Okay, so when you generate your code, this is real important. And in one way, maybe I need to specify it more in these programs. You're not programming like in the midterm, you're not programming this thing to handle 3 students. You're handling this, you need to write the code to be able to handle 10,000 users, 10,000 students without even changing anything. The only thing you're going to want to do is add in those objects, right? Because it needs it. It would need an object per student. So you might have 10,000 new objects being added to the program, but the last thing you want to do is then change the program, right? So what I want to make a point of here is make sure you're not limiting your code. And one way students are limiting their code is by not fixing the duplicate issues or duplicate code. So let me see if I can, hold on, I'm going to bring up an example. Hold on for 1 second. Okay, so here's my code. Okay, so I want to console log out the students. This is say code for the midterm, and I write code like this, where I'm saying, hey, I'm going to console log out student with an index of 0. And then I'm going to go down here, I'm going to cut and paste all my code and paste it right there. And I'm going to change all the index numbers now to 1. And then I'm going to cut that code out again, and I'm going to paste it here, and I'm going to paste it in for a 3rd student. Some people will, in the midterm, put at least 2 students in there. Some put 3, some put way more than that, which is fine. But the last thing you want to do, and again, this is where you're going to get dinged for duplicate code. This is duplicate code, even if the index number just changed. Okay. because you can actually create your code to do exactly this with just one of these. Okay, so the part where I mention not limiting yourself, you just capped yourself off. You just limited your whole program right here. If I had 3 students and I put code in it like this, because all I can now output is 3 students. If I have 10,000 students, there's no way you would want to even create all this code, right, for 10,000 students. So, and every time you add a new student in to your school, you would have to add a new block of code like this into your code. That you can't write code like that. It just doesn't happen. So, the one part that's in the rubrics of duplicating code, this is duplicating code. It specifies inside of the assignment here. Let's see, right here. It says there should not be duplicate code in the main JS file. If there is, you will need to refactor the code by creating a function for the duplicate code and then calling the function when it is needed. So just take one of these, create a function, and so anytime you need to output this information, just call the function and output it. You're going to need to figure out how to do that because you're not going to be able to keep these hard-coded index numbers here. But in some ways, some of the assignments that you went through in the JavaScript practice in week 1, you should already know how to do this. That's why I was mentioning that the JavaScript practice file, even if it has little exercises in it, it teaches you a lot, especially when it comes to this. So anybody who has duplicate code like this, and you know if it's you in your midterm, please get with me after this meeting or by tomorrow. And let's talk about what needs to be done with that. I mean, what I'm saying is you need to get with me because I need to talk to you about this, and I'm going to deduct some points. I'm not going to deduct as many points as I should because some of you would just fail real quick. For instance, if I had 10 students in my objects and I had 10 blocks of these, you would have already lost 90 points because each one of these blocks is considered duplicate code. So one of them would have been acceptable and the other 9 wouldn't have been acceptable, meaning that you would be at a minus 90 already. Now, this happens as well. I've seen a few times when you're actually writing out your inner HTML information. So make sure the inner HTML is not duplicated as well. And if you do have duplicates on your inner HTML, you're going to have to get with me on that too. And you have till tomorrow to get with me on this to sort of be relieved of some of the point deductions. Let's see. Everybody understand that? Anybody have any questions? I have a wow for the chat. It is a wow. That's why I'm feeling your pain a little bit, and I want to make sure and give you guys some of the points back in a nice way versus just hammer you with a huge point deduction. But that's just how the Rubik's is written out, and that's you have to learn how to get rid of duplicate code. Any questions? If you do, just go ahead and turn your mic on. Alrighty, and then variables. Make sure you're using descriptive variables when you're Descriptive variables meaning like you can have, if it's just a counter, you can have an I that's equal to 0 like this. But in your button, you really don't want to just put B here and have it just like var B, because that's sometimes useless, especially if you look at your code as being 5,000 lines of code. I'm going to have to go look around to see what B is or do a search. So try to use as descriptive variables as possible. In the upcoming assignments, if you do have non-descriptive variables, I'm going to have to ding you on it, unfortunately. So just do it. It's the easy part. It's not technical. Um, just have to type a few more characters, but it'll help you long term. It'll help you as a developer as well. The other thing you have to look at is if you received a program that was 5,000 lines long and you saw A's and B's and C's everywhere, and you had to go back and track it versus something that said student or something that said address or something that said name. It obviously, you can see how much easier it would be just having descriptive variables as a developer that receives a program from somebody else. All right, any questions on last week's assignments? If not, let's move on to this week. This week you have advanced objects. Advanced objects will then take you into creating two files. Um, in the advanced object assignment here, you have two files that sort of interact with each other. And you have one piece of the file in the assignment, let's say in the second file. The second file is called a sort of a constructor file. And that constructor file has a constructor operation piece in it as well as a prototype piece. Um, from what you guys have gathered, why would you want to have that constructor file? What is that constructor piece? Not necessarily the prototype piece, but what is that constructor piece for? Can somebody answer that?
Is that what's making it's housing all your what would be global variables?
Um, it is it's helping to create all your objects. So if you, well, let me see here. Hold on for one sec. Because I think now instead of passing the students in this fashion, in the objects, in the data itself, all you're now doing is passing the data. Is that a game or okay, so in the constructor file and the constructor piece, the objects now are you're just passing the data, right? You're just passing JBond 330 University. You don't have this whole object really in place. And what I mentioned before is that some of the data like in this fashion you may receive from systems, some of it, and in most cases, you may just receive the object without all these keys in it. But you know that the developer will pass to you, what that first field is, what the second field is, what the third field is. And so since it's just passing the data and we need to create an object, basically it'll take the data and then add these keys in front of it to create this one object. So I pass one line of data in and it creates this object for me. Make sense?
Yes, it does. I was thinking of the namespaces, I guess on page 528. I was saying namespaces uh, create a single globally available object. that encapsulates all your code.
In 538.
Sorry, 528, second paragraph. That's what I was just confusing that with a constructor. I thought I had the names mixed up, I guess, or unless I'm still confused. I thought it was the constructor encapsulates all your code, so it's all on just a local scope, and then your prototype, all of that is within your constructor.
Um, yeah, that might be a little different. It almost looks like the student format that we have, that we went through at the beginning. But again, the constructor is mainly for us to create this object. And then the prototype piece is for us to be able to modify the information within an object. Inside of the constructor, we can put a function in there. I think if you watch the videos, I think I actually it has a function in it. Uh, and this would be on the follow along side. And then what we do is we change that function into a prototype, because we want to get functions outside of this prototype. We don't want the function in there, because literally what's happening is if we left a function in an object and we had to change it, and we had 10,000 of these objects, then we would have to change 10,000 functions versus just having one function, and then we change one function and then it changes it for everybody. So in the constructor side of just building this object, this would be reasonable information to keep inside of an object, but not necessarily a function. So I hope that makes sense. In one way, that advanced object assignment is almost like a library, but there's actually a whole lot more complex libraries, which we won't get into much. In the goal number 8, you do get into custom libraries. So what you're looking at there is actually a simple library. There's a whole lot to libraries, and it gets real complex. And it's not necessarily something that you can learn quickly in this class, but in goal number 8, at least it gives you sort of a snapshot view of what a custom library is. And then later, when you get into PWA 2, where you use jQuery libraries or a jQuery library, um, that's actually a library that was built using some of the techniques that you'll see in this goal number 8. Katie, yes, the constructor is the one that starts with a capital letter. So again, this is a simple custom library that you're going to go through, and it's good for you to know that. And then you're going to go through basic canvas. That's a sneak peek of HTML5 when you get to it. Basically, what you're going to build is, now you're sort of, instead of creating console logs, now you actually get creating some, this is more of a graphic bar chart. So what you're doing here is you're adding in a background image. We dynamically create these bars, and you're going to see how to do that inside of the follow along file. Then you put a title on it. You can put headers on top, bar charts, as well as information on the bottom of the charts. So it's kind of a fun exercise. The follow along is pretty easy, and it's kind of cool now creating these versus just doing console logs. Now, for now, in a lot of the assignments, when you see anything that has to do with random numbers, try to stay with this. There's a number of different random number formats that you can use. Try to stay with this format. And then another huge hint here is that week number 7 is vitally important. Hint, hint. It's going to be on the final, or that formatting will be on a final. So understand the formatting of Goal 7 as well as, sort of how it's laid out and how it's used with having two different files. If you can do that, then you should be okay. And if you go through assignment 7, the advanced object assignment, and you don't get 100, that's another item or another assignment that you're going to want to fix. Got that? All right, the rest of the grading for week 2 will be done by tomorrow. There's a lot of you that have already completed. Many of you have the midterm already done. There's a few that, actually a few of you that I want to talk to that have the duplicate code in it, the one that we talked about on console logs and inner HTML. So please get with me on those. And then everything else for the week should be completed tomorrow. Just a reminder, because this is still happening, when you send in your code, make sure you guys have a lot of console logs in it. Again, because if I jump on it to debug, it's just going to take me longer because I'm going to have to put the console logs in too. But nowadays, instead of me doing that, I'm actually sending it back. So I'm going to send it back to you and say, put your console logs in, and then I'll be more than happy to look at it. And then make sure you look at the rubrics and instructions. Use that as a checkoff list and make sure you read it in detail. Don't skim over it. I hate to ding you guys on points when it's not even technical. When it's more of something that just was skimmed over or not read. Again, don't wait to the last minute. You guys probably know that by now. You can if you like pain, but I know this kind of pain's not fun. So get started early. And in the feedback, in FSO, if something doesn't look right or if you don't understand the feedback or you don't like the feedback, just please get with me. And then on all the assignments that you're turning in, I don't necessarily give out the keys. I know some people have asked to just give them the keys of the program versus walking it through. And a lot of times those folks are the ones that only have like 20% or 20 points out of 100 out of the assignments. So basically, I don't give out the keys because in most cases, somebody will just copy it and it doesn't help any. What I like to do is just review things with you to make sure there's not anything missing. Um, Again, I gave the example of what we're trying to teach you here and comparing it to the English language where we go over the ABCs, we go over building words, sentences, um, and then we eventually get to a story, writing a story. And what I find out real quick by asking questions is where those holes are, whether you need more help with sentence structure, whether you need help with, um, you know, other things that will help you write the story faster. So I normally like to ask the questions to lead you to the answer. So what questions do you guys have? It's about 12 to 10, and I'm open to any questions you might have. No questions? Everybody good?
Okay. No, I do. I was giving everybody a chance. I feel like I'm the only one asking questions tonight. Um, so when you grade our assignments, I notice, I do understand your feedback in the grades
Okay.
module, the FSO, but I notice you don't make any marks or comments on the actual GitHub repo. Um, is there a reason why, or is it harder for you, or because I guess I was expecting, to see you making line comments or something within our code.
Um, yeah, that would be tough because we have to as instructors put all of our feedback and information in one place.
Okay.
That's the reason why everything's in FSO. I'm trying to think back on specific things where, I mean, if you want to get back into like specific items, feel free to get with me on those. Where there might be some confusion.
Okay, yeah, because I know the first month, last month when I took this course for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
I would make comments on a specific line of trouble I was having, but then I noticed, like I didn't know the extent to student instructor interaction via
Right.
each of our repos.
Yeah,
But
just
I
get
understand you probably got like a couple dozen students to go through, and God bless you, you have to read all of our code.
right.
So,
Yeah, and in when I'm grading, I'm grading. I'm not necessarily grading to give a ton of feedback at that time. That's where I rely on you to come back to me and we can talk about, solutions or how to fix something.
okay,
But when I'm in a grading mode, I'm just kind of grading everything and
sure.
then giving as much feedback as I can without sort of fixing a piece of code. Yeah, sometimes even in the comments, I'll look at a lot of the comments, but sometimes I'm skimming through it. The comments are really for you to get practice to put comments in. It's not like I'm necessarily reading them all, but it's for you to have good programming habits. Because if I am a person later picking up your code and you know you as a developer would want to make sure you got your comments in there so people know what you're doing. And again, you would want comments from other developers as well. You'll find all kinds of developers out there. Some won't even put comments at all, and then you have to read through every line of code. After a while you get good at it, so you can skim through and see it. But sometimes if the formatting's all off and everything doesn't look right, then it takes you longer to debug something or find out where you might need to insert a new piece of code. So yeah, like, if you guys have any and need any feedback on your assignments once it's graded, please get with me. Any other questions? You guys feel good about things so far? Tim, go ahead and ask your question. Tim is asking what exactly is Ajax. Ajax is something that you're going to learn in PWA too. And what it is um, let me tie this into what I talked about earlier when I was talking about the login object where I had username colon and then I had my username there and then I had a comma password colon and then the value of my password. Um, what an Ajax call does is, and what you're going to learn too when you work on in PWA2, as well as when you get into some of the backend courses where you have PHP involved, Ajax allows you to take that object and send it to a server somewhere. And just look at it like the server has some other piece of code that it has. And let's say on the server that piece of code is named login.php. So it's a PHP file that's sitting on the server. And what Ajax does is says, hey, um, I'm sitting on my client and I type in my username and password, I hit submit. And what Ajax does on my client first is packages up that information in a format that Ajax knows about. And then it sends that packet off to the server. And the server gets it and the server strips it apart and it says, oh, okay, so you want me to run login.php. What I need from you is the information for the username and the password. And so that should be packaged up already inside of that little packet that came from my computer that Ajax created. Um, so it packages it up, unpackages it up on the server, takes a username and password, checks to see if it's valid or not valid. And then the server then packages the things back up in an object, whether it's a success object or a failure object, and sends it back to the client. When it gets back to my PC, it then says, it'll look inside this little object packet and it may just say successful and give me other pieces of information, or it may say failed. So that login interaction between client and server is the Ajax piece. Now, the other Ajax piece that we talked about might be, remember when we looked at all the student information inside of an object, I might have a request that I send to a student database somewhere or a system that has and stores all the student information. And it may say something like get student information.php. So on my computer, I want, let's say in my browser, I want to generate a report that shows me all the students for the school. And so it sends a request to the server using Ajax and it says, hey, server, here's my packet. I want to see all the, I want you to send me all the student information so I can see it here in my browser. So the server then takes it, pulls all the database information out of the database for that student, sends it back to the browser, and then it displays. So that's sort of what the Ajax piece does. It's sort of the gateway between your PC or your Mac and a server that has a database on it. Good question. That's good, Lee. Lee mentioned that this is his second time around. And for those of you who might be struggling in this course, most times what we'll see, if you stick it out, you'll see that things become easier, even if it seems just like a bunch of information all at once. And a lot of times it is a bunch of information at once. But if you actually have to take it a second time, it's not a bad thing. That second time, when you take it, a lot of times, well, Full Sail will take that higher grade. So in one way, that's what you want. And then the second um, reason would be that you don't want to just pass this course and not necessarily totally understand everything. You want to pass this course and really understand everything because this connects to a lot of other courses that you're going to get into. It connects to a lot of things that's happening in the industry. Um, what I keep telling people is to look at to get a gauge on things on what's actually happening in the industry and if something like JavaScript is needed or jQuery, again, jQuery is just a library that's sitting on top of JavaScript. Just go to something like Indeed.com and in the search area, just type in JavaScript and jQuery, and you'll see a lot of jobs across the country coming up. Indeed.com is again is just a system that accumulates information from a lot of different job sites, and then it displays it to the user. So you'll see on the left hand side how many jobs are available in which salary bracket, based on the search criteria that you put in. So it's actually a nice tool. This will be, well, it's hard to tell. This is going to be one of your hardest classes. Um, no doubt. It's a lot of material, a lot of information, a lot of assignments. Um, Really good for you as far as gearing up for the other classes. Some of the more immediate classes aren't going to be as tough. You guys are getting into after this some HTML, CSS courses, and then later on you jump back into the PWA2 class, which is jQuery, and then you're going to get into some other JavaScript library type things and frameworks, and then you get into backend courses, which is PHP, Python, all the database courses, which is fun stuff. But a lot of the other courses aren't even written yet. That's why I can't necessarily give you a gauge as to if this is one of the hardest ones. When the curriculum was the older curriculum, um, the JavaScript courses were a place where a lot of times there's students that, the success rate wasn't as high as some of the other ones. But it's there for a reason. It's that way for a reason. Good questions. You guys have any other questions? Anything you guys curious about on the industry side on what's happening? I mean, I think you guys are in a good position right now. I mean, the web obviously is not going to go away. Um, I see it changing often, which means that you're going to always have a job. You're always going to have food on your table, which makes it nice. Um, the more experience you get, the more obviously you can command on the salary side. So just get as much experience and knowledge as possible.
Yeah, I'm up here in the right by Vancouver, about 45, 50 minutes east of Vancouver.
Okay.
And I looked on Indeed, and there's a whole slew of just like you said, type in JavaScript or jQuery. There's
Uh huh.
tons and tons of jobs,
Right in your
and
area?
oh yeah,
Wow,
it's
nice.
crazy. And so one of the things I was thinking about, uh, and I was wondering, is a couple months ago, one of our courses we talked about, like business planning and goal setting and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I thought about like reaching out to like a local web design and development firm here
Okay.
in the city I live in, and just saying, hey, telling them my story. Hey, I'm going to Full Sail, blah 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 blah. What would your recommendation be? Say I want to approach somebody and not really start an internship, but do you think it's beneficial or it doesn't look goofy for me saying, hey, can I just help review code or something, just to get experience and practice? Like,
Right.
or is it like when would be a good time for me to even think about doing that?
Well, I mean, one, it's always good to get experience, whether it's paid or unpaid. Um,
And I wouldn't be looking to get paid, just not at this point.
well, I mean, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised that, there might be some JavaScript company out there that really doesn't have somebody that's good on the interface side. They might they might just have back-end developers. Like in my company, we've been in business for 14 years. On the website, probably the last 10 years. Um, we deal a lot with marketing companies and design companies that like to do all the front end stuff. And so we were picking up a lot of the back end work for most of the companies, or a lot of the companies in Orlando. So basically, they were doing all the sales stuff, and then they were just funneling stuff back to us on the back end design and development work. And then we got into a lot of the JavaScript, jQuery, because a lot of the design firms or marketing firms out there, they just like to make things pretty, right? So they need to then make they need to then pass things on to a person such as yourself that now has JavaScript experience, and shortly you're going to have the jQuery experience. And once you get through that class, you might be able to start picking up little jobs here and there. Um, there's going to be a lot of firms that don't even know the jQuery side or the JavaScript side, and that's becoming so, you know, it's out there now, and a lot of people are converting over to JavaScript and jQuery. That I mean, for me, I wouldn't probably go to take something for free. I would always be the guy trying to find something. I mean, I would go talk to a lot of people and see if there's anything that you can do that's paid. Even if you're a student, I mean, your rates can be really low, but try to get something out of it. I wouldn't do it for free. Um, there are opportunities as well with Full Sail. If I don't know where you need to grade. I don't know if you need to be like an A or B student. I think you might have to be an A student in a class. And there's some process in place where you can ask to be a tutor for that particular class that you got an A in. And then I think that's sort of a paid thing. In the jQuery classes, well, most of the jQuery classes and the JavaScript classes don't have any tutors in it yet. So I'm thinking that piece might be open. And I know there's been tutors that are current students that are getting paid, but they got to be, I'm pretty sure they have to be the A students. So, an opportunity there. What other questions do you have?
I have a question.
Okay.
Um, for someone who I'm pretty new to JavaScript and I'm new to all of it, and this class has been extremely overwhelming.
Okay.
So, my thing is like I hear you talking about like the future with jQuery and jobs and stuff, but I'm not confident in this class. Like I've done okay based off my grades, but that's because I've had to put in so many hours, just so many. And it's like, well, we go from this class to another class. Then I think after the next two classes we will have, I think that's the jQuery class. So it's like, uh, we sort of don't have a lot of time to practice. So if we don't have a lot of time to practice, how can we get to the level of being okay for a job? Or because you just said after jQuery we can look for something. Like, I mean, that's the goal, but don't we need way more experience? Because this class, whew, you know?
Right. Is this your first time taking it?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your first time as a developer, or have you developed before?
Yes. This is my first. This is my very first time.
Okay. So, with somebody like with your profile, it what I've seen in the past, it is really tough. It's stressful. It's time consuming. It's a lot of information, a lot of assignments. There's no doubt. Um, but I can tell you that, well, what I just mentioned about Lee, and I think Katie will vouch for it too, that they're on their second time around, and it's a whole lot. From what I'm hearing from them and some others, it's a whole lot easier the second time around. Because a lot of times, what'll happen too is like when you get into like week two, and if I go back to the English language thing, and I start talking to you and asking questions, many times what I'll find is that you didn't pick up something on how to write a good sentence structure. So in our development world here, it may be something like, you know what, you're missing how to return something from a function. And if you miss that little piece there, I can guarantee you when you get into some of the assignments in week 2 that if I, it may be, if you don't ask questions, it might take you 10 times as long as what that time says. It may be even take you 20 times as long. That's how critical it is that you understand each piece along the way. And I know it has a lot of information. I know it is hard to comprehend stuff like that, especially if you hadn't done it before. And it's just a lot of technical jargon going on, and it's a lot of assignments that you have to do. So sometimes the best thing to do is to take it over again. A lot of times, what I'll see is that the people who take it 2 times, 3 times, they eventually become the superstars of the class, and then they're happy when they move on. I'm happy because I know that when they move on, they'll be fine once they leave this class because they have the basic foundations that they need to be successful in the upcoming development classes too. So it may be just reps that you need. I compare it again back to like just athletics or just exercise. I can't, and nobody can expect to get any results if you're just going to practice one time, if you're just going to go work out one time. You got to do it like tons and tons of time. And the more results you want, the faster results you want, you're going to have to just dump in a lot of time to get the results fast, or, you know, pace yourself. Pace yourself in this scenario means that you may have to take it a couple times.
So, based off of what you just said, okay. Well, what I did was I took it upon myself to just get additional help because
Okay.
I wasn't comprehending at first, and I found someone who he's been a front end developer for a very long time, and
Mm-hmm.
well, based off of what you just said, okay, let's say I passed the class because so far it looks like I am, and this is my first time taking it, and I do understand everything so far. Will I be okay going forward in the next class, or do I need to take it over just to take it over? Because that's where I am right now. I mean, like I get the concepts that are being taught just by practicing and talking to you and
Mm-hmm.
my teacher and just using all my resources basically.
Right.
But do I still need to retake it, or is it okay to go on? Because this is my first time taking it, and right now I am passing.
Yeah. If that's up to you. A lot of people will pass. Um, I would always suggest if you pass and you're still uncomfortable, I would talk to your student advisor to see if you could retake it. Because in one way, that's what you're paying for. I mean, are you passing with, a D, a C? It depends on where you want to be too. So that's up to you. If your deal is you just want to pass because you rather do front end um, design work versus development work, then you may want to just move on. But you are going to run into the other development classes coming up. So if you're fuzzy on not necessarily Java specific things, but programming specific things like a conditional and how it works, a function, how to pass arguments, how to return something from a function, objects. If you're fuzzy in those types of things, then you're going to struggle when you get into those other classes too. Now, that might be fine with you to just go ahead and struggle when you get those other classes too and just pass. I would say if you want to be a developer, then you might want to retake it. If you want to be a designer, then in one way you might just want to move on once you get just that passing grade. Because in one way, the designer is a person, well, you guys are trained in a different way than a lot of schools, which is unique to Full Sail, which makes it kind of cool in my books because being in the business for 14 years, um, I was kind of curious when I came to Full Sail, and my questions that I asked them pretty hard was, "How are you guys teaching students to be designers and developers?" Because when I hire people, I'm either hiring a developer or hiring a designer, um, and that's just the way it is. So how I'm not sure I might be the right instructor for the school because I see the separations clearly. But then I took a step back and I said, "Well, wait a minute." I said that when I look back at the people that are working for me, the most valuable people that I have that I can't afford letting go is the ones that know the design and the development side. Most cases they're going to be strong in one or the other. Now I have a guy that's been working with me. Um, he's a guy that's actually been pushing me for a while to go look at Full Sail and become an instructor up here. He's a guy that has 3 degrees from Full Sail. He came to me, and at that point in time, most of the guys that were working for me were technical people, developers, not necessarily designers. So he was sort of the first designer that came into the company, and he, at that point in time, obviously loved the design side, but then took an interest in the development side. Now, after the 10 years, he's like an excellent guy on both sides, the design and development. He's a guy that I can't necessarily, it'd be hard, it'd be hard for me to let him go, or if he decides to quit, it'd be a tough one. Now, you guys are sort of in that same boat where I think if companies really look at your skill sets when you're coming out and that you know both sides, it's huge. It doesn't mean that you're going to do work on both sides. If you're a designer and you just decide that you can design all your life if you want, or you can become a designer that's now potentially like a project manager or a designer that maybe becomes the art director. But if you're actually a person that sort of steps up the salary chain there and you go from being just a plain designer up to one that might be a designer and project manager, that skill set is something that you'll have because even if you're not going to be the person that writes the code, you're going to have, I mean, the more you know about that code and what needs to be developed, delivered to you, so you can tie it into your overall system is huge. Most people that's coming from other schools that know just design won't know all that. So therefore, they'll be designers and move up the chain as just a designer. If you guys have both sides, it's hard for me to see why you guys wouldn't get paid more because it's just a more valuable skill set having both sides. I'm not sure I answered your question, Marcy, but ask some more if you have them.
You asked. You did a good job asking. I know exactly what I'm gonna do.
Okay.
If you have time to take another question,
Yes.
well, you can make it quick. How often do you run across people with websites where they're creating them with Joomla or things like that? Like, how does
All the
that?
time.
So how does that affect like the hard coders or developers? What does that do for you?
Yeah. We've done a lot of work on, I think that from my personal experience, that the best content management system out there is the Drupal platform because it's built with security in mind from the ground up. It was built with, um, it's built more on the technology side. So a person that's actually a designer type has a harder time working with it, but it's a better platform. Um, you guys should come out of the school with knowing all the skills that or you'll have the skill sets to be able to pick up something like a Joomla or Drupal. I think Joomla is sort of, to me, maybe second in the bunch, and then you might have something like a WordPress site after that. But when you look at something like a Drupal platform, the White House is using it, Sony Music is using it. There's a lot of big sites out there using it because of how it's built and how easy it is to create modules to customize your solutions. And there's a huge community behind it, open source community that helps develop tools for that. I'm actually getting ready to build a few big sites, and it's going to be all Drupal based. But yeah, good question on
Okay, so
the content management side.
yeah, I mean, it's not like you go in and you kind of clean up their code and make it nicer or whatever, make it meet their needs, and then the next, update when they update the Drupal system or Joomla, it doesn't overwrite your work.
Well, you have to design it in a way so it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, if you make, well, it's always a bad idea to take their code, and there's a piece in there that's sort of referred to as the core of Drupal or the core of Joomla. That code you really don't want to touch, because that's the part that if you upgrade your content management system later, it could hammer your code, um, being that it may make it where it doesn't work anymore. So yeah, you're gonna have to learn how to develop the code so in a way where you don't need to touch the core and you're just mainly touching the modules. Now you may use somebody's module. Say you wanted to use a module that you just want to plug in that might be a shopping cart. Um, Once you make changes to that module, you're pretty much going to have to stick with that module and that version of that module forever, unless you're updating along with the developer that actually originally created it. So there's a lot of technical um, sort of business practices that you have to be aware of, and development practices as well.
Is that similar to Bootstrap or anything? I've never heard of.
Yeah, Bootstrap is sort of like I don't know, in a way I compare it almost to like a jQuery library. It's not like a total solution.
Okay. I've never heard of it before. That's all.
Yeah. Drupal is Drupal will challenge you, but actually make you really valuable at the same time, because it'll help you on all your skills, like with PHP, databases, jQuery, and JavaScript. That's all tied right into that. The other platforms that are good too that you might have heard of is like Ruby on Rails, which is
Yeah, I've heard of
on
Ruby on Rails.
Ruby on Rails is
I
a
thought that was
nice
actually, I
platform
thought that
too.
was a language.
I'm sorry.
I thought that was a language.
It has
It's
its
not a
own
language.
language in it, but it's a solution as well. It's a foundation or a platform that you can build on top, and a lot of companies use it.
Okay. One more question, and I'm done for tonight.
Okay.
I was looking at the video on prototypes. You created two prototypes from two functions. The two HTML, no, the two HTML prototype and two string prototype. They were both in one function, in
Okay.
the constructor function. So, um, let's say that I guess you was using a blog, for example. Um, uh, would I guess what I'm asking, you have two prototypes in one function. Will you ever need to use both of those prototypes on anything you do future wise? or you're only gonna use one, or am I just
It doesn't
confusing?
matter. Yeah,
It
it
doesn't
does.
matter.
No, it depends on what
Okay.
your solution is going to be.
Okay, it depends on what your solution is gonna be. Okay,
Yeah.
that's all I wanted to know.
Okay. Alrighty. I want to respect your guys' time. If you guys have any other questions, please get with me. It's 10:25 now, so I appreciate you guys being here and keep working hard. This week tapers off a little bit. Next week's a little easier. But again, it's important to make sure review this video if you have to, but make sure you guys review those items that I said was real important. That's going to be on the final. Alrighty. Thanks a lot. Thanks for showing up.